So why don't you just start off by introducing yourself
Sure.
to the audience who don't know who you are. Obviously, I know who you are.
Yeah,
So.
sure. So my name is Kris Dalls, and I'm a integrative veterinarian in Saratoga Springs. I got my veterinary degree from Ohio State in 2002. Did an internship at New York City at the Animal Medical Center, and did pretty much immediately went into training for acupuncture and herbal medicine at the International Veterinary Acupuncture Society, or IVAS. It was at the time the only acupuncture school for veterinarians. Now we have another one in Florida called the Chi Institute. And I've done a lot more training with the Chi Institute since then because it's a lovely place to go. And I've done some chiropractic training there and herbal medicine training as well. In 2013, I think, I got my master's in public health, which is not something I use so much in my day-to-day practice, but it does... Actually, that's not true. What public health does is it teaches you to look at a population, not just an individual, because we're talking about a population. So if I'm making recommendations about flea medication, I'm not just thinking about my patient, I'm thinking about the family. I'm thinking about where they live and their risk factors. So it just has a slightly broader perspective. And in some ways, it's almost the opposite of the holistic side of me. So I've got kind of a, range of trainings and background. So.
Well, that's why I really like you. And I've been going to your office now for years with multiple dogs, and that's what I really like about you is you're diverse, you are realistic, and you know when to turn on the holistic side, and then you know when to, for an example, when I brought Lakota, my Dutch Shepherd, in, I've heard stories of people who go almost a radical of holistic, where she had a torn she had to get the TPLO, and you were like, no, you need to go to the to get an X-ray.
Right.
Where I've heard like some holistic vets we're going to try to treat this with ice packs and
I know. And it really, every patient that comes to me, I'm definitely playing, I consider the Western side of my training to be my left brain side, and my, Eastern side is kind of my right brain. And I do feel that I'm constantly, kind of toggling back and forth between the two sides. And sometimes it's very clear, we have to stay Western. And sometimes it's clear, no, Western medicine's not going to be able to handle this, and we need to go with something more, I don't want to call it natural because sometimes it's not, but just more holistic or what have you. So, and that was really, keep in mind, I got my training, I graduated in 2002. The holistic, and I started working in the field in 93, the holistic world was in its infancy. It barely existed. And I found out about it when I moved to Idaho, which I was telling you about earlier, and worked at a grocery store of all places. This was after college, that had quote unquote organic products. I don't even think there was an organic label yet from the USDA, I know. And so I remember thinking and meeting a naturopath out there and thinking, oh, this is brilliant. Like, a doctor needs to bring in both sides. I want to be that doctor. And I saw at the time that the human medical world was not ready for that. I would argue they're still not ready for it. The veterinary world is much more open-minded. We're willing to experiment. We don't have insurance companies yet telling us how to practice, although I do believe that's coming. So it was really like, okay, I'll go back to my childhood dream of being a veterinarian because that's where I can do this thing that I didn't think anyone else out there was doing. And there was no internet to find out. So I went to vet school saying, I'll be the first holistic vet. And then was thrilled when I got there. And I was like, oh, there's already an acupuncturist here at Ohio State. He was a equine anesthesiologist, and he had been trained at IVAS in acupuncture. And I was like, okay, so I'm not going to be the first one, and that's fine. I'd rather have teachers anyways. But it was a long time ago, and I really didn't know if my colleagues were going to take me seriously. Like, that was my concern. So that's why I went to AMC to do my internship, because at the time it was like, and it still is a really, solid internship. And I do think it has given me some legitimacy, with my colleagues, because now the field has really grown, but at the time it was still fledgling and new. So
that's really cool. So the organic fruits and vegetables at the grocery store made you start thinking about. Were you always? I know you said that you always wanted to be a veterinarian.
Yeah, when I was a kid, it was like, the typical, like the 5-year-old. I think we got our first dog and I was like, oh, I want to do this. And then I definitely got distracted along the way. At some point, I wanted to be a paleoanthropologist or something and maybe a sociologist. And there was a lot of ologies that I considered. I have an inquisitive mind. So, I was interested maybe just in really being a professor just for the sake of, being in a world where everyone's there for a state of inquiry and looking, researching. And that interests me, but my partner at the time was actually getting his PhD in sociology, and we realized we'd never get a job together. So I was like, all right, well, I'll just go into medicine, and we'll, be able to move around together. So, and then we split up, and he's a sociologist now, and I'm a veterinarian. So, and it worked out fine.
That's how it works.
Yeah, it worked
Abby,
out well.
you went to Ohio. Where'd you go?
Did you? Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, that's where
I loved Columbus. It's such a great town. It was really a pleasant surprise. I was a little depressed when I got there after living in Sun Valley, Idaho, and the flat and the gray and the ice. I had a hard time with it. But once you get a community, it doesn't matter. And I had a really nice community there. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I, like I said, for those of you who are listening and watching, your practice is and Kaysen goes to you now, and some of my staff and my clients, and I refer as many people as I can to you because.
And likewise, I do to you as well. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
It's such a good vibe. Like you go in and you're sitting on the floor, and you're actually like really working with the dog, and I love that. It's a very non-traditional way, in the best way.
Yeah.
You don't feel pressured. You don't feel nervous. The dogs feel better.
Yes, that's for sure.
Because it's like a home, right?
Yes.
You got the essential oils going.
Yep.
It's just a good vibe. You're not rushed.
Yeah.
You go to a vet now and they're like,
I know.
Let's go.
And with corporate America kind of taking over my field, it's that you're going to see more of that. I mean, they're really being held. I feel bad for the veterinarians who are, in those corporate practices. I know some of them, there's good and bad there, but the biggest issue is going to be the time, and they're being tracked now, they're being measured, and that's what happened to the human medical field. So we are very much following suit there.
But do you feel like you're going to be sheltered a little bit because of your practices?
Absolutely.
When I think I go into your office, it's at least an hour.
Yeah.
Just
talking. I have nobody telling me what to do, and I never will. So
well, that's what I mean. Is do you feel like you can run your practice the way that you want?
100%. And I do work really closely with veterinarians who are in corporate practices. And, I think that they're practicing for the most part the way they want. It's just, I think, the structure of their day that's really being dictated. I don't know. I do hear some people complaining about that they wish they had half-hour appointments instead of 20 minutes.
Right.
And I burned out in 20-minute appointments in a year, because after my internship, I went out to California and worked in the Bay Area at a wonderful little practice, and I just couldn't do it. 20 minutes was...
It's a rat race.
Oh my gosh, I lost so much weight. I was trying to keep up. I could see things holistically, even though I wasn't trained yet. And so I'd want to educate people, and that takes an hour. So I'd stay late from work, miss the train back to San Francisco. Like, it was just this awful, I never ate, drank. I just was not taking care of myself. And so I figured out that I just need to do this outside of the kind of conventional world and create my own style.
Well, that's why I really enjoy what you do.
Yeah,
thank
you.
That's the vibe, right? Like when you go to other veterinarians, and also it seems like all the small vets are being bought out.
They are.
By the Mars.
They are.
And I don't know the other big ones, but.
I know. I mean, I don't even know. I feel like I've lost track of who owns what now. Like, I don't know if VCA is owned by, I don't even know anymore, but yes. And it's, it's hard because not a lot of people want to buy practices. The field is 80-90% women. It's a huge responsibility. That's not to say women can't do it, but if they want to have a family and own a practice, that's a lot. And women do it all the time. I don't know how, honestly. I wouldn't be able to do it. But a practice like that with, 20, 30 employees and. Well,
also too, there's just if you do get pregnant and you're working with animals, it's not every dog doesn't walk in that's nice, and it's or small.
Yep.
Right. Like if I brought in my new Mastiff, which you haven't met yet.
Yeah, I can't wait to meet him.
He's,
how big is he now?
He's big. He's about 155.
And how old is he?
He just turned a year.
Oh,
the interesting thing about him, because honestly, the little girl that got kidnapped up in Moreau, that's where I'm from.
Yeah.
Scared the shit out of me.
Yeah, me too.
everyone,
Yeah,
right?
that was terrifying.
It was literally a place that I spent a lot of my childhood in.
Yeah.
It was so close to home. And my wife and I we're going to get another dog because we just had Lakota. And I was just in my head, I'm like, be safe, go lab. Be safe, go chocolate lab or something.
Yeah.
So after that happened, I was just, what's the most innately protective dog I've ever worked with? And it was the South African Mastiff. And that night I reached out to Peterbilt Borbles in Texas and got one.
Wow.
And, now I'm like,
He's going to be 200 pounds, isn't he?
Yeah, his dad was 210, his mom was 185.
Oh my goodness.
But the interesting thing about him is his sexual maturity is ahead of his mental maturity.
Oh, gotcha.
So he's big. He's getting big, right?
Yeah.
But so his growth plates are opening. He's big.
Yep.
Like he looks like an adult dog.
Yeah.
But up here,
he's
like a 3-month-old dog.
Yeah, right.
He's a puppy.
Yeah.
He's still getting into everything. He's still chewing on everything. You have to. Where is he? It's like a puppy all the
really?
time because he's just. And because he's big, he can do
more damage.
do damage quick, right?
Yeah.
So if he gets a bed and I've never owned, and it's not a training thing because he listens. His obedience is phenomenal.
Oh, that's good.
If I tell him to leave it, he'll leave it. If I tell him to down, he'll down. If he'll do it. If I tell him to heal, he'll heal. But he's also extreme. He's also very opportunistic. So having a 150, 160 pound teenage dog.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Because he still acts like a gigantic puppy.
Yeah.
And then, when we go away and we travel and do different things, it might, he's at the point where now we're going to, like when we go to Europe and Australia and places to seminar, he's going to stay here because he needs that professional structure.
Right.
But, my dad, who's 70 something can't, and I'm like, if you see another dog on a walk, just go the other way.
I know. Oh my
too big.
gosh. I know.
Anyway.
Jeez.
So that's what I really love about what you do. And I love the balance because I myself personally, like my wife and I go to a naturopath, Dr. Herbold here in Clifton Park. And so we're doing blood panels every 6 months. We're checking, we're doing the Dutchie test, which checks the cortisol and the testosterone and all the things. And so it's proactive healthcare.
Yeah.
Where I think and once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Right.
Where once you start to get educated on, he was telling me, hey, listen, the thing is in our healthcare system, just generally speaking, obviously there's all these different outliers, but generally speaking, it's almost too late when you go in with a disease or something. But he was telling me some of the success stories that he has had from just doing regular blood, just once or twice a year.
Yeah.
Just check in your liver, check in your blood cells, checking your testosterone, checking your muscle mass. He plugs me into this machine and tells me how hydrated I am, where my muscle's at, where my fat is at.
Nice.
And it's something that I've grown to really appreciate and be grateful for because he's telling me all these stories about how he's caught certain diseases.
Yes.
He knew about his Parkinson's before it came.
Yeah, that's the key. And I don't have his training, but I've got my own. And there are so many things that I have been able to predict, including my husband's heart attack.
Really?
6 months before he had it. I mean, he's okay, but I saw it coming based on just what his tongue looked like and his pulses felt like. And also the way he was eating and his history of it in his family. But like many things just based on energetic changes. These aren't even necessarily measurable changes yet in the body. They're just energetic. And in Chinese medicine, we're taught to look at tongue and pulse. It can tell us a lot. But even things like, I have dry nails. That's going to tell me something about maybe your anxiety levels too. So I know there's some connections in Chinese. The Chinese made these connections thousands of years ago, and over the thousands of years, they've honed it and they've perfected it, and they've made connections that we don't even recognize in Western medicine. I don't even think a naturopath would necessarily think that way. I'm not sure. In fact, I need to really sit down with a naturopath sometime and find out what they were taught, because I've been to them and I don't quite understand the training that they get. I like it, but I don't have a complete understanding of how they look at the human body.
He's big on the methylation processes.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Glad to hear that, actually. I think we need to look at that in dogs. I suspect that we also have a methylating problem in some dogs because the methylation thing in people was kind of this fringe idea for a while. And now they're like, now that we can test genes, we know that 40% of people have a decreased ability to methylate, and I suspect the same is probably true in dogs. And
Right, that's something to think about.
yeah, it is. And because people tell me all the time, oh, my dog is so sensitive to medications. I'm like, that's a methylating problem. Lower the doses.
Right.
You know, we shouldn't be using full doses necessarily, but I can't prove it. It'd be nice to prove it.
Yeah, he's really big on the meth, and luckily, to surprise by him too. Like I've been doing a lot of research and listened to podcasts about methylation and how it works and how our body, and it's cool because he'll pull it up and he'll give you like the graph of basically this runs this, and then this runs your sleep, and then this runs your stress, this runs your anxiety, and you're like, and he's like, and if any of those are off, your whole system is off. And so I got super this last probably 12 months, I've been biohacking. Biohacking. So I've been supplementing a lot more than I ever had been.
I am too.
I've been, I got a sauna. I got a cold plunge. I'm doing NAD IV drips.
Nice.
I'm doing all the things.
Wait, what's NAD?
So NAD, it's an acronym. And don't ask me. This is an acronym for a reason. It's big. But NAD basically, so it rebuilds your cells at a mitochondria level.
Okay.
So the way that I was explained in the research that I've done is, and I'm sure there's a lot more to it, but the reason why we age is because our cells, our DNA cells, they start to fray, right? So you picture that little thing, and it starts to fray. And so what NAD does is it goes in and repairs those cells at a mitochondria level.
So it's nucleic acid something maybe? Nucleic acid, I don't know what the D would stand for. I have to look that up.
Yeah, I mean, I could look it up, but it's actually really, really, really cool.
Huh. How often do you get an infusion?
They say once a month because it's very expensive.
Yeah.
So I try to do it. I've been doing it like once a week.
Yeah.
And it really is cool because once you start the IV drip, it's this overwhelming so here you can read that because it's
nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide.
See that?
Drip. Yeah.
NAD.
Yep, NAD. I can see why you use the acronym.
Yeah.
Therapy delivers NAD. Coenzyme essential for. Okay. Oh, it's a coenzyme.
Yeah. So it's pretty cool.
Neat.
So it helps go in and rebuild your cells. And who kind of like made it, I guess, famous is Tom Brady's been doing it for a long time.
Okay.
So that's why he still looks the way he looks.
The sound of the improved cognitive function. I feel like I might need a little bit of that myself.
It's great. They use it for addicts. They use it for all sorts of different things. But at the end of the day, it goes in and repairs the things that make humans age.
Yeah, right.
And so you feel better. But when you do the drip, I handle the drip. And it's just with saline, so it's in a bag. And so when I turn it on, it's so overwhelming. You can feel it. And it's very, very interesting. And you can feel it starting to, I don't want to say attack, but you can feel it start to go towards the things that your body is battling or fighting or whatever. And it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
So anyway,
I've heard of that one.
Yeah, I've been it's not really popularized.
Yeah.
It's not approved by the FDA, I don't believe, and it's this.
Yeah, nothing I do is, so it's like for me that's a low bar anyway. So
right. Yeah, they're not paying the FDA yet.
Yeah.
So that's anyway. I've been doing that, and I've just found it so interesting to kind of look at. Same thing with veterinarian care is what we were talking about earlier. Is I find that. And God bless him for wanting to get into working with animals and dogs. It's the same thing with dog training. Like you have a passion for dogs, but then once you get into it, you realize you have to really battle personalities and people and marriages and narcissism and egos and
neuroses.
Yeah,
I
all
see
of
some
it.
Of that. Yeah.
And so I just find I was at the vet years ago, and the doctor at the time was it was for my Dutch Shepherd, and he was like, well, she was getting fixed. She was getting fixed, and he was like, well, we'll just staple the stomach because she's a larger dog. And I said, well, she's not. And he wouldn't listen to me when I was telling him that she's a Dutch Shepherd. He just kept hearing Shepherd. So he's thinking this big 70 to 80 pound German Shepherd. And I'm like, she's 35, 40 pound Dutch Shepherd. And so he just kept riding. We're going to do this. I really recommend the staple, this. And at that point, I'm like, he's not even listening to me.
Yeah.
And how many people are like, okay,
yeah,
sure.
Oh, I know most people.
So that really, just that one interaction scared me. And then there was this one interaction too where, and I get it, like everyone's on a time schedule, but people are just knocking at the window, like, and you don't have an opportunity to really first of all, from a behavioral standpoint, veterinarians don't have a fair chance to get to know a dog.
Yeah.
Right. They're in this little clinical room, lights are bright, smells weird, and people are coming in and they're like,
I'm sure it smells like stress too. I mean, I think dogs can smell stress in ways we can't. And I think that's why my practice it works out so well, because there's no stress hormones. It's all like good stuff happening. And
it is.
And I think that sets everybody up for failure, especially the dogs, in an environment like that.
Yeah. And people, like all my clients are like, they need like some medication before they go in.
Yeah. And the workers there are stressed too, because it's high paced and there's unpredictability and the schedule doesn't always go well and people get unhappy when the schedule's not. So it's a pretty tough environment to be in. Because
it's a really passionate profession. In the beginning.
Yeah. Right. In the beginning.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you kind of get ground. It seems, not everybody, but you get kind of ground down. And so I love what you do. And just to, I wanted to talk about like what I'm doing personally to kind of do similar goals and try to be proactive. And I've spent lots of money and time investing into, I have kids and I want to live happy and healthy, and God forbid anything is going to happen to me. I'd like to know about it before it's too late.
Sure.
And it doesn't, and for people who are listening and watching, it doesn't cost a lot of money to go get a blood test to see, is your liver functioning right? Or are your white blood cells or your red blood cells in good favor? I mean, these are the things that you go, whoa, this is something's up here. Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah. I'm glad you're going to a naturopath, because Western medicine is great when you've got big, obvious problems and acute problems, but when you're going for preventative care, you just need a slightly more nuanced look at things. And that's where functional medicine doctors and NDs instead of MDs can really help out with that kind of thing. So, and I go to a similarly integrative medical doctor as well. She's an MD, herbalist, and she's getting trained in homeopathy. And she just also takes an hour, and I
like that.
Yeah, she's different. So.
And more my wife's, but my acupuncture just came to you.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Kim?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, not Kim. Is it Kim?
Is it Kim? I've only been to her once or twice.
Dear.
My wife goes to her, but she's great.
She is great.
She's super cool.
I liked her a lot.
When I went in, she's down in Albany, which is like an hour, but she blonde hair, and she's super cool. And when we go in there, when I'm on the table doing acupuncture, she's telling me about Western medicine, or I'm sorry, about Chinese medicine, and she's telling me all the things, and she's so passionate about it, and I love that, because that's what I want. I want her to be into that, because she's working on me.
Well, and the good news about that is, acupuncture, being a Chinese practitioner, is really the opposite of being a Western doctor, because I do feel like my Western skills, I have to work very hard to stay current, and my medical knowledge has a half-life of probably 5 years, and then it starts to, sort of wane. Whereas with Chinese medicine, you become more of a master the more you do it, because it doesn't change. And so, but it's so intricate and complex, and it's like a giant web. That every patient that comes to you gives you something new to think about, or a new way to look at it, or a new part of that spider web to kind of pull on and say, oh, look, it also goes over here and affects this. And so I feel like I get more enthusiastic about Chinese medicine over time and less so about the Western, because the Western stuff is pretty easy. It's kind of formulaic. Yeah. Whereas the Eastern medicine is more nuanced. It's almost as much art as it is science. Maybe even more so art. So you do become more of a master, and it is exciting. I still get results that blow my mind sometimes, and I've been doing this for more than 20 years now, the Chinese part. So yeah, it's very gratifying work. And for me, working with animals, I don't get the anxiety and the fear and the aggression or the pushback from the patient. They really develop, only a few, less than 5% actually become more nervous with it over time, but 95+% just they can go from being very nervous about it at first to pulling their owners into the building, Might be the treats I have. I don't know, but I think it's the acupuncture.
Yeah. Because so explain to me, like, because people might not even be knowledgeable and understand that acupuncture is a thing for dogs.
Yeah.
So what is the overall goal when you did it with my older dog Lola, for arthritic relief and some other things. Like when you get a dog in, and I even know with Stuart Kaysen's giant Newfie, I think you started doing acupuncture on him just because he's bigger. Like, what is your overall goal, and what is the benefit of acupuncture for a dog?
It depends on what we're talking about. I think acupuncture shines and is most obvious in its benefits in my older patients. And I don't do a ton of acupuncture in my younger patients. I'll do it if they have a specific problem they're coming in for, like a blown disc in their back or a bulging disc that's causing neurologic deficits. But for my older patients, it is so obvious the benefit. Sometimes you have improved vitality. Usually, depending on how old they are when they start, it's anywhere from after the first treatment. Sometimes it'll take multiple treatments, especially if they're very geriatric. I do a lot of dogs who've lost the ability to go up a flight of stairs or even up a couple of stairs, or they can't get in the car anymore. And the acupuncture, whether it's improving their neurologic function or if it's just giving them more vitality, I don't even know that we know the answer to that. There's no way to measure this. And that can be frustrating for us Westerners who like hard data. But I've learned to just trust the process now. But for my older patients, it's really, I know they live better and they live longer with regular acupuncture treatments. And most people come in every 4 to 6 weeks. It's not a huge, time commitment. But, I think there's so much about acupuncture that we don't understand. We like to measure things and we like to have predictable, repeatable results to prove that something even exists. If we can't get that, we doubt its existence. So we have to kind of let that standard go, because this really is, sort of in this more nebulous world of, the soft findings, I guess you could call it. They're trying to prove that acupuncture works. They're trying to do the science around it and do their due diligence, but it's hard to prove, because when we do science, when we try to prove something, we always have a treatment group and we have a control group. The control group is supposed to get no treatment. But what they do is they actually still treat the control group. They just use points that don't make sense. The problem is they're still getting an acupuncture treatment.
It's like a placebo.
Yeah, but they're still getting a treatment. And so they can't prove a difference between the placebo group and the treatment group. Yeah. And so there's no proof that it works, because everyone feels better when they're getting acupuncture. What they have to do is do nothing at all. Yeah. And then compare it to, but that's hard, because then you can't prove the lack of placebo. So I think we need to look at animals more, honestly. I think there's not as much funding, unfortunately, in my field, but we need to look at acupuncture in the veterinary world, because we don't worry about a placebo. Yeah. We're looking just for measurable results. Did that flight of stairs, did the horse run faster or did it not? That kind of thing.
Preaching to the choir. We see that a lot in dog training, where, science is great. It saves lives. Yep, it's helpful, but there's also, I think there's a broad understanding that science is the end all be all, and it's always done properly, and it's always done with good faith, and it's never funded by certain people.
And it's never biased, which of course it is.
Yes.
Just the way we ask the questions is bias, right?
Right. And we see that a lot in the dog training space, unfortunately, where they'll do a controlled group of they'll for an example, if you got a big dog that is maybe or a dog that's not, the dog doesn't know sit. So we see this is the science in dog training is they'll look at a dog that's never been trained how to sit. They'll put maybe a correction collar on the dog, or not. Maybe they'll just add a correction and they'll say sit. The dog's like, what the hell is that? They correct, not even a trainer, somebody that's just in the group will correct the dog. The dog still won't sit. And then they'll swab the dog, and then they'll say, okay, this dog was stressed because of the correction. And then they'll come over here and they'll just get a piece of food out using positive reinforcement, and they'll just say sit, and the dog will be like, they'll put their butt on the ground and then they pay the dog. And so they'll say science says that using positive reinforcement is better than using positive punishment. And it's like, if you just objectively look at that, you would understand that's not a fair study.
Yeah.
You know, and then at the end of the day, they're backdooring.
Yeah.
This test was brought to you by, you know,
yeah,
like,
right.
guys, come on.
Yeah.
So that's the same thing. So
it does. You have to be a critical thinker, and it's hard. You know, reading scientific studies and knowing what wasn't done properly takes some training. Like that's a tough thing to do. It's one of the reasons I got a master's degree, actually, because we did more of that in my master's than we did in my veterinary degree, because veterinary medicine, you're just trying to keep up with, you know,
the new stuff.
Yeah, learning the medicine. But critically thinking, it's not something we are necessarily taught how to do in a medical degree. So yeah, science is hard. It's hard to know. It's hard to know when it's done well and when it's not.
And I think for the general people, the dog owners who aren't.
Yeah, they're not going to read the literature anyways.
Yeah,
so.
they just see the headlines of science. Science says this, and you're like, oh, and you're
right.
And that's the world we live in now, where you just read headlines of these things, and people, because we live in this fast pace, we're like, we take it. Oh, okay.
Yep.
So yeah, it sucks. But acupuncture correct me if I'm wrong, just like the lamest terms would be opening up the pathways in which energy and blood and all the things go. And a lot of times in a being, right, in a dog or even in a person, let's say there's a pathway that goes like from here to the spine and it gets blocked. And then you use acupuncture, which is a small little needle, goes in, it starts opening that up to.
That is definitely a great way to describe it. We do have these meridians or channels in the body, and we can prove this now. Like we've got lasers and what have you that can prove that this energy exists. And actually, the Chinese even figured out the schedule, the sort of the biorhythm of the movement of this. We call it qi, which is an electromagnetic energy in the body, and it runs through these channels like on a regular schedule. And a lot of your bodily functions actually happen if you're balanced. They happen on this schedule. You know, you wake up in the morning and you have to urinate, and then you have a bowel movement, and then you eat, and then you digest, and like that's all part of that biorhythm. And if you're balanced, your body works that way. If you're not, then things have get a little more complicated. But so we think of it in terms of that energy may be in certain parts of the body in an excess, which would be what you're describing, like pain, stagnation, a tumor. That's where there's too much of that energy. And then there may be also places in the body where there isn't enough, it's deficient. And so when you put needles in, luckily the body knows what to do with the needles. You don't really have to give it instructions. You just put the needles in and it will kind of move that stagnant energy, which might be in one area, and it will balance it out and send it to areas where it's deficient.
It's like a dam.
You open that up, and then the water, it flows, more smoothly. And we talk about it not in terms of just the quantity and where it's located, but whether it's flowing smoothly. So it's kind of like a tidal wave. It's like so there's high tides and low tides of this, and so it's at high tides and there's certain meridians and what have you at certain times of the day, and then it's at low tide at other times. And because that's how waves work, any kind of electromagnetic wave is a tidal, wave. So. Yeah, that's the science of it. And we also know, like when we put a needle in a point, it's a space, and we know there's capillaries and little nerve endings in there. And when we put a needle in that space, there's an instant release of endorphins, serotonin, what have you. There's opiates that are released, so there you get the pain, the pain control, at least in the immediate 24-hour period afterwards. And we know that there's a electrical signal that goes to the brain. We know there's an electrical signal that comes back down both meridians. Even though you just needled one side, the result comes to both sides. And we know some other things. Like science has been able to prove some things, but I would venture a guess that it's probably less than 20% of what's going on. There's so much more that we just are too unsophisticated, or our instruments are too unsophisticated to understand. And so it is a bit of a leap of faith. And I think that's why a lot of Western doctors don't take that leap of faith, because it requires faith, right? Like it's like I believe it, and I think that's why veterinarians are more open to it than human doctors in many circumstances, because we see the results and we can just believe them because there's no placebo for us. Right. The animals either are better or they're not. It's murkier in the human world. I really hope that human medicine will take this on. 8 states currently mandate coverage of acupuncture by insurance companies. I am really hoping that continues to spread. That was why I got my master's in public health. I actually really wanted to work on policy and start having acupuncture be mandated at all 50 states, because people should have access to this medicine. It's so much more helpful than just, sometimes you need to cut out the tumor or you need the chemo or whatever. But there's so many people who are dealing with chronic illnesses, and we just don't have the tools in Western medicine for chronic problems. So, and
also too, just like a basic thing that'll happen, like if your back hurts and you're just taking a ton of Vicodin or OxyContin or whatever, because and then you go into acupuncture and then they start realizing like, whoa, this is you can start opening these things up, get better circulation, and doing red light therapy and all the things. So it's interesting. So what would you say your average dog that comes in for acupuncture, what would that look like? Is it like the arthritic, older, crickety?
Yeah, I think, and it's less for the arthritis. I feel like the older, larger breed dog with weaker hind end. That is where my regulars are coming in. It's because the dogs will do really well for, let's say, a month, and then people notice like, oh, we can't get up the stairs anymore, or we can't get in the car anymore. So that's probably like the largest population of patients that I have are the older dogs. But I do a lot of herbal medicine, so I will get a lot of allergy dogs, a lot of cancer, and cats too. I shouldn't just say dogs, but we're here to talk about dogs. Cancer, allergies, autoimmune diseases. I've got a few people who've snuck in and they use me as their primary vet, even though I try not to be anybody's primary. I've got so I do carry some vaccines. I have a microscope. I have a blood lab that I can send blood results to, and but I'm not available 7 days a week, so that's why I try to have everybody have a regular vet. So yeah, I think the acupuncture though is. And it's hard to separate acupuncture from herbal medicine, but the herbal medicine is more for internal medicine, like chronic gastrointestinal problems, GI problems, right? Digestive issues, dietary issues. But as far as the acupuncture, I would say the main dog that I treat is the older dog.
And doing acupuncture will just open up those pathways to help them, because what I also look at too is the ability for like what we call rear end awareness. So a lot of times dogs they don't use their back end definitely as much as their front end in navigating. So they don't manually start. So what we do with a lot of dogs at a younger age is we do a touch pad, and so we do a touch. So the dog will come up on this little bowl, and then we'll start. Because in the beginning it's so interesting. It's like watching a baby deer how to walk. You take the food. And they're like, trying to get it. And you go, all you got to do is move your rear end around. And they can't. They're like, and then pretty soon they start to use that rear end. And now if you have like a trained dog, like one of my dogs or something, you can just spin on the bowl and they'll just tip tap and their back end will just start moving. So rear end awareness, especially for the bigger dogs, is really important because it builds muscle. So as dogs get older, their muscle mass goes down, like humans, it goes down. And so it's important for that too. Do you find that like what causes the rear end to start to
it's probably, I think it's mostly spinal cord issues, just kind of, and also brain issues. So I would say it's probably mostly in the neurologic system. I think the muscle loss follows that, but I think it starts in the neurologic system. And so
just doesn't fire.
Yeah, I'm not even sure I can give you specifics on that. I don't know. I think it's just general degeneration and aging of the brain and spinal cord. And the reason I say that is it's not just a guess. When I test their reflexes, right? In fact, as soon as dogs start coming to me, I'm testing those back feet, and I'm just turning that paw over. I'm looking for proprioception, which is knowing where their feet are, because that's typically the first sign And the first abnormality that we can detect is we turn the paw over and it takes more time than normal for it to correct. And that tells me, oh, we're starting. But usually those dogs are still pretty strong. So if they've lost proprioception and it's just the beginning of this degenerative process, and degeneration is really just cells dying and not regenerating, if that's the case, then I just tell people, like, at some point we're going to probably need to do regular acupuncture, because that proprioception loss progresses to weakness, progresses to incontinence, and eventually, and they also can progress in some dogs to cognitive dysfunction, which is very common and underdiagnosed and undertreated too. So, and I think that the acupuncture, this is where we don't really know what it's doing. We don't know if it is sending an electrical signal more efficiently. We don't know if it's just a vitality improvement that's making them stronger. Because I will say, they're not improving in their reflexes. Those don't improve, but yet they're stronger. So I don't think it's just a 1 + 1 = 2 kind of equation.
Well, I know I can say that acupuncture just makes me so relaxed. And I know even when we did it back in the day with Lola, she would just melt.
Yep.
Just those needles would get, and it's so cool to watch.
I know.
The needles will go in, and in the beginning she lived until she was 18 and she was old.
Yeah.
And I remember she'd be stressed and she'd be kind of whining and there's arthritic. And so she was kind of tiptoeing around and I wouldn't have been able to keep her comfortably alive for as long as I did without acupuncture.
Yeah.
Because the moment that you started putting needles in her, she would just lay down and she'd just relax and she'd start snoring.
Yeah.
It was just so relaxing and relieving probably too.
Yeah.
That's probably that made the relaxation happen and she felt better.
Yes.
And then so she's like, because if you're uncomfortable, it's tough to sleep. It's tough to relax. So you're just in this constant state of uncomfortable.
Definitely.
How do you feel about it? The gut health is something I've started to dive into.
Yeah.
So holistically, how do you what do you look at when you look at gut health? Like, educate me on that. Like, I know that gut health has a big part to do with behavior, obviously longevity, disease, stress, all the things.
Yeah. I definitely am big on gut health as well. And unfortunately, I always go first to my Western. So I like to talk about what we know, what we can measure. And then when we don't have answers there, then I'll go over to the right brain Chinese side. We don't have a lot for the gut. We don't have good ways to monitor it. We don't have good ways to measure it. There is a company out there now that's looking at dog feces, like you send them.
Saw that stool.
And they can tell you a little bit about what is out of balance or overgrown, and they will even formulate like a fecal transplant for your dog.
Do you know that company?
I will think of it later. I can text Melissa because she's my brain. So what I haven't done yet, we've done this in a few cases, mostly for dogs with chronic gastrointestinal issues, but I haven't actually started to correlate this with behavior. And maybe you and I should start start a spreadsheet and just start looking at this a little bit, because I can probably collect some data that will help inform you. And so I'm usually dealing with the gastrointestinal issue. My behavior cases will come in and I will ask them about gut health and I will address it if they have it. But it is sort of like I see so many more cases for gastrointestinal issues.
What does that look like?
Chronic diarrhea, chronic vomiting, sensitivity to food and food changes, skin issues,
like hives and
mostly like ear infections, stinky feet, or foot, infections on the bottom of the feet, in the groin. So anytime you have ears, groin, armpits, and feet, bottom of the feet, especially, particularly, that tells me we have either a leaky gut situation, we have a food intolerance, we have a food allergy, and so those are the parts of the body that are affected. We're taught that in Dermatology 101, how to differentiate what's bothering an animal based on where it's presenting. So we look at the body parts that are affected. But I think this gut-brain connection is a fairly new concept, at least in the veterinary world, and we don't have a lot to go on right now. So it's a lot of experimentation. we don't really have anything to monitor even our progress as we improve things, other than maybe the behavior of the dog and what their poop looks like. So it's very observational at this point, and I'm hoping over time somebody will take this on and really start collecting some data around it, and then playing around with it, because even probiotics, there are a couple of brands out there now that are pretty much geared towards dogs and their microbiome, which is different than ours. So I don't think using a human probiotic is necessarily going to serve the dogs very well. But the problem with probiotics even is you have to keep giving them. You never fix the problem, really. You're just putting a Band-Aid on it. Managing it. So
I use the A2 kefir, like gut health. It's geared towards gut health and the enzymes, and it's tough because it's kind of like supplementing. Especially with you can ask somebody I feel so much better. With dogs, it's that they're probably insufficient in certain things in their gut, and adding things to help. It's almost like it's tough to gauge.
It is. Well, we have to have, in veterinary medicine, we have a higher bar because we actually have to see measurable results. And otherwise we don't know if we're doing anything. And that makes it hard because you're right. With people, we can say, how do you feel? Do you feel like you have more vitality? Where with dogs, it's like, can they get in the truck now? Can they get up the stairs? We actually need to have something measurable to know what we're doing. And when it comes to behavior or gut health, those are two things that are very hard to measure.
Yeah. It's almost usually in conjunction with something too. It's not always just, we'll take these probiotics and your dog's going to be better. It's almost like there's a lot going on.
Yes.
And I remember I think one of the first times I was introduced to you, maybe it was way back in the day. My ex-girlfriend had my St. Bernard's brother, and he suffered from chronic hot spots. I mean, big itches, big scabs, big raw spots, just constantly, his whole life from when he was a puppy till a little bit out of a puppy until he was an adult. And she went to you, and then you recommended Lisa Rosamino and started a more raw diet.
Yep.
And they all went away that.
That's great.
So how much gut health, does gut health, and this is just me not knowing, so this is kind of ignorancy, but does gut health, is it the same as diet and nutrition? Are they different?
That's a good question. I think that diet is the foundation for gut health. But I also think that gut health is not the only explanation for what's happening in our body, like the hot spots, for example. And that's where this all becomes very hard to predict or hang your hat on, because it is somewhat experimentation. We got Lucky maybe in that dog. I mean,
His name was Lucky, by the way.
Oh, are you serious?
Yeah.
I don't remember Lucky. Boy, that must have been a while ago.
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
Yeah, wow.
Probably 14, 15 years ago.
Oh, wow. Okay, so early on, yeah. And actually, right, because back then it was really hard to find affordable raw food.
Yeah, she just did a co-op, and she dropped all the raw food off at her barn in Ballston Lake or something.
Yeah, that's right.
Changed that's how I got introduced to raw.
Yep. Oh, that's great. My gosh, I love it.
Because I had his brother.
Yeah.
And I saw that change, and I was like, well, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah. And that's how it spreads, right? It's just, people see results, and that's really how the veterinary community has come on board. They're not on board with raw yet, but they're not yet. Some are. Some of them are closet raw feeders. They will not tell their clients, but they've told me, they've admitted it to me, which makes me feel good, because it's like they can see the results in the patients that we share,
right?
And it's made them wonder.
And it's also how much education have you? And I know you can't say for every veterinarian out there, but how much education? Because I know you went off a couple different paths of education. How much education did you get in nutrition and in diet?
Very little. Even with I have probably more training than most veterinarians in various things, plus a master's degree. It's hard to find. And I think there actually is a newer nutrition course out there for veterinarians. I don't know much about it yet, but I don't know that we would... it would really cover this. So now the Chi Institute has a food therapy course, which is for Chinese practitioners. And that deals more with not formulating diets, but more looking at the energetics of food. So if you eat this food, does it cool you off or does it warm you up? Does it dry you up or does it make you more, does it moisten you or whatever, So we look at it from that perspective. And that's pretty, that's interesting because it's complementary to the acupuncture and the herbal medicine. And I almost can't practice without that. If I have a dog who's hot and getting hot spots and we're feeding chicken, which is a very hot protein, I know we're just going to have to throw herbs on that to counteract the effects of the heat. So that's different though than formulating foods, putting together a diet. So that's why I do like some of those pre-mixed raw foods. Because I feel like they're mostly using the same formula. It's an 80-10-10, which is 80% meat and I think I forget what bones, I think, and then and then there's the organ, and then there's veggies sometimes. So I do encourage people to use a multivitamin on top of those if they don't have it in it, because I'm realizing that our food systems are just depleted. Like our soil's depleted. I mean, I learned how depleted I was when I developed hypothyroidism, and I went to a functional medicine doctor because I wanted to do more than just take thyroid meds. And I asked to look at all the cofactors that affect the thyroid, and they were all depleted. And I grow my own food. I have a farm share with an organic farm. So at least 6 months out of the year, I'm eating food right out of the soil, still depleted. So it kind of changed my tune about supplementation, which you were mentioning earlier. And I went from being against multivitamins to pretty much in favor of them. I tell people maybe use it 3 days out of 7, rather than every day, just to make sure we're getting everything covered. But there's nothing wrong with doing it daily, honestly, at this point.
What's what's a recommendation for a multivitamin for a dog?
I like Thorne, Canine Basic Nutrients. RX Vitamins has one called RX Essentials, which is for dogs eating quote unquote homemade diets, kind of to round it out. That one seems to be a little more food based, not just synthetic vitamins, which probably work better in the body. Those are probably my two main go-tos, and I just have people rotate with each purchase, get something new. I don't even know of any other multis per se. I'm sure they're out there.
Sure. What are these? What is the typical dog supplement? What is it supplementing? Like what?
Oh, sorry, it's like a multi. So it's got the B vitamins, the D. The micronutrients that we may or may not be getting from the food, so it's just to make sure that the food is, whatever the food doesn't have, they're still getting it. So
I find it. I think a lot of people, especially people who are in my ethos, and not all of them, but just understanding that like a raw diet is. Yes, it has to do with raw meat and other things, but it's just the same thing with humans. Like the more raw veggies, raw minerals, raw things that aren't what raw to me, and I don't know if this is the definition of it, but raw to me is just unprocessed.
Yeah, me too.
Right, so it's not a processed thing. And with dog food, it's now I'm really happy because now dogs are becoming this huge hierarchy in our whole lives, right? Which is our lives, which is great because they're becoming more of a priority. People are spending more money on them. They're caring more. They're educating themselves more. And it's only going to be a matter of time. I would say within the next 5 years, there's going to be this big shift where you can't look away, because that's what's happening in humans, right?
Yeah.
There's so many educational podcasts out there, professionals, experts, people coming in and saying, looking even at methylation and things of like, if you just change the way your diet is and you change your supplements, you're going to change your there's so much evidence of that. And now with dog diets and nutrition becoming, there's more education on it. There's people like myself who are like, look, I choose to do raw meat, raw veggies, give the dog, and this is, to me it's objective, but to some other people it's subjective. But to me, it's like what the canine was supposed to be eating. That's why they have all these daggers in their mouth. And so my point is yes, we're not living back in the day where they have to go kill a baby rabbit to eat, although they would like to. But it's their body is still regulating those things the same. And so for me, a raw diet is, people look at it like, oh, raw chicken or raw beef, or because we have been told, and it is true for humans. It's like we've been told for so long that that's so bad because of these reasons. Right. But people don't understand that dogs' stomachs they have all this stuff in it that can, they can eat. Like the first time I saw somebody eat a raw, they had chicken backs, like with the and they had the ribs and the bones in them, and he's just sitting there and he's chewing. He's looking at me, just chewing on it, and I'm like, in my head, I'm like, you're not supposed to eat raw chicken. And the person that was feeding raw, she's like, this an aluminum can go in this dog's stomach, and it'll probably break it apart. And that to me was like, wow. And the dogs, and so wolves. Going back to my education about wolves too, because I know that you spent some time working with wolves in your not in your master's, but
no, this was between college and vet school.
So that's what I saw with the wolves is these 8 to 10-year-old wolves' teeth were impeccable. And when I started working with wolves, I was between dog walking and dog training. So I was still in the game. I was early 20s, Colorado, tent living, no showering for a week type thing.
Nice.
It was pretty cool. It was it's called Mission Wolf. It's sustainable wolf sanctuary. So they have the big biomes and they grow all their own fruits and vegetables, and they collect all their own rainwater, and it's very cool. It's different, and it's in the middle of southern Colorado, and it's the Santa Cristos Mountains. It's beautiful, and so you're just hearing
near Uray or.
It's south of Pueblo, I believe, in West. So it's like West Cliff, and then it's like 30 miles, I think, outside of West Cliff.
Nice.
So southern Colorado, wherever that is. So I started looking at these wolves' teeth, and I'm like, this is so crazy, because they're like, an 8 or 9-year-old kibble-fed dog, their teeth are shot typically, right? There's a lot of periodontal things going on, and it's not their fault. It's what they're eating. And so I started really looking at that, and I watched them, and at the wolf sanctuary, they also they would the wildlife, Colorado wildlife would call in like, hey, there's an elk that got hit, there's a deer that got hit, whatever, and they would eat these animals and their hide and their bones, and the other thing is like I was thinking in my head, being, a dog walker, basically a professional poop picker upper, I'm like walking into some of these enclosures where you could actually interact with some of the wolves, and it was so clean because they were basically pooping out scat. And that was,
Isn't that
I was
how
like,
little they defecate. They poop like cats.
Yes. So I saw that, and I was like, what is going on? And that's why for me, I've like been so big on educating people. I had a client that it was feeding raw organics, and which is a raw food company locally, and her German Shepherd was like 10-ish years old, kind of lethargic, arthritic. And this is no exaggeration. She started feeding raw food, and the dog was up running around again.
I know. I think I see a lot of dogs who are being held back by their kibble. And I do think there's just like with people, there's always a population of them that do fine and they live out there. I mean, my own dog, actually it was my husband's dog when we met, he was on kibble. I had a hard time getting him off of it. If he had a taste of anything else, he would get diarrhea. And I just decided if it's not broken, I'm going to leave it alone. And he lived to be 17, and he never had periodontal disease. He never had any health issues. It was just kind of one of those freaks. And he was a Shepherd mix, so he should have had all kinds of things. So there is a population of dogs who seem to do well, but maybe if he had been on raw, he would have lived to be 20. Who knows? And I have to say, a lot of the smaller breed dogs, I have a hard time getting them to raw safely. So I will often have them go on like a dehydrated raw. It just seems like some of the raw diets are a little too rich for them. It might be the liver, I'm not sure, but I worry about their pancreas. So I'm cautious with the smaller ones. I'm cautious with the older ones. The pancreas is a scary organ that likes to get persnickety, and it can really be a problem if it gets inflamed. But for a young, healthy dog, especially a larger breed, it's amazing. And some of them already have problems with the kibble by the time they're 2 and 3. I mean, they're already, they smell, they're getting ear infections, their eyes are gooey and goopy, and that's heading towards the arthritis. But I've seen what you're talking about, which is the older arthritic dog whose life is turned around. I've even seen lipomas not disappear, but definitely shrink and regress a little bit.
Wow.
Just from going off of processed food. So I think it is a question of processed versus unprocessed. And I do like some of these cooked, prepared foods that are coming out. They are definitely a higher price point.
It's better than kibble, though.
But it's better than kibble, and it does reverse a lot of those chronic health problems. So for people who aren't comfortable with raw, they can either lightly cook the raw if that's more economical, or those prepared foods are really much better.
Yeah. And I also noticed too, just on raw food, it doesn't have to be a pre-planned meal where you have to expend lots of money, because you're spending lots of money, because it's a better diet. So there's that, right? Like even for me, when I go grocery shopping, it's twice as much as I go to Healthy Living. So everything I get, because I have kids, and I would consider myself, like I always say, like, I'm successful in my own world because I can buy organic food for my family. That's my definition of success. I'm very happy with that. So it's more money. But you're not getting the processed and the chemicals and the mass grown, the chickens that are growing 20 pounds a day or whatever, right? So that's, exaggerating, but it's a good, what you just said was great. It's like, to me, it's either processed or not processed. And that's really, in my opinion, the difference between, because if you're getting kibble, it's processed. There's no real getting away around of it. So, but there's also ways to do it in a cheaper way. Even if you are buying chicken that's not organic, it's still better for the dog, likely, than the processed kibble that they're eating.
For sure. And then you just have to make sure you're getting bones in them somehow, or bone meal. But and you said something earlier I was going to expound on, but I can't remember what it was.
Maybe it was the thyroid?
No, it was an expense thing or a food thing. I'll have to come back to it.
Well, it's probably what you see as practicing veterinarian is we see that a lot too. And I work with a company called We Feed Raw, and they give me all this information and data about it might cost you more per month.
That's what it was.
But in the long run, you're not doing the cancers, likely. You're not doing all the
the chronic ear infections that you're going to the vet for at $300 a pop. And I always tell my clients that what you are spending on food, you will not be spending at your veterinarian's office. And kibble, by the way, I don't know if you've priced it out lately, but it's gotten pretty expensive. When I do the math with people, I'll do it right in the room because I want to know what I'm asking them to do. So we'll figure out what their dog weighs or how many pounds of dog is in their house if they've got multiple dogs, and we figure out at 2% of that body weight combined, this is what it's going to cost you. And then I ask them what they're spending on kibble. And these days, since COVID especially, that difference is much less than it used to be.
It's not that much. It's not that much more.
It's not. So we're lucky where we live, though. We have a lot of options. I don't know what it's like in the middle of the country if people in central Kansas or Oklahoma, if they have the co-ops that we do or the companies that have popped up. We're really lucky. I know California's, the West Coast is well stocked with raw feeding co-ops, but
what do you think the biggest problem is with veterinarians today with raw food? Is it just the lack of education? Is it the science diet people in their offices every month? Like what is it? Because I recently went, and it depends on what vet you go to, right? Like Burley had developed ringworm. Gosh, and this ringworm was awful. It took us so long to get rid of because they wouldn't scrape it to figure out what it was. So they were kind of doing the foam and the antifungal, and it just wouldn't kick. I finally got this antibiotic that he's been on for a while, and that's why I've been supplementing with lots of probiotics because it's probably tough on his liver. Anyway, we went in, and first thing she asked was like, well, what's his diet? And I said he eats mainly chicken, and she's like, what's that mean? And I didn't know her, so I didn't really want to go down that road. And she was like, well, I was like, it's a raw diet, and she started going down the whole thing and salmonella and all this stuff. And I said the process that my raw food does, because they are approved by the FDA and they do ship door to door, right, is HPP. So what is it called, Abby? Their cold processing. HPP. That's the pager too for the e-collar. That's why it threw me off. The high performance pager. High pressure something. Anyway.
Pasteurization or something?
Yes. So they use that to kill all the things, right? And so she was like, here's my point.
Did she not know about that?
She didn't know about
that.
So We Feed Raw, because they are door to door, right? You can go online like Amazon and order your dog's raw food, and it's at which is cool, right? And that's why I partnered with them, because a lot of people are asking me, Tom, I don't have a farm in my backyard that can, because we have companies around us that will they raise all their own animals just for dog food, which is crazy. And they don't have that, and so that's why I partnered with them. I'm like, if you want to, if you're interested in, and the cool thing is it's try it. Just try it. And if you don't like it, or they don't like it, or it's not, then go back to what you were doing. But people are interested in it. And so that blew my mind that she's telling me how dangerous raw food was. And I was like, I actually am working with a company that does the HPP, which kills all those things with
right.
it's not hot water, it's cold. I think it's cold water, and it kills all the bacteria and all the things. And yeah, you could argue, well, it's killing some of the good bacteria that goes into the gut that you might be getting from other things, but it's like, guys, you got,
Yeah, we got to get the pathogens out of there for sure. Yeah.
So it's,
and I do think it's the pathogens that I think that's the sticking point for most veterinarians, Salmonella, E. coli. And I mean, I feel like we're all adults. We know how to handle raw meat. I mean, I bring raw meat into my house for us to eat, and I have certain surfaces that it touches and certain cleaning, supplies that I use that I keep separate from what I use for my vegetables. That's just kind of like basic hygiene. I do the same thing with my dog and my cat's raw food. It touches the same surfaces that our raw does, but not what our vegetables touch, for example. And so I think there's a bit of like common sense around how to handle raw meat. Now, when it goes into the dog, they have shown that dogs can shed Salmonella and E. coli at, small amounts, but potentially enough to make a human sick. So I do think if you have someone in your household who's immunocompromised, on chemo, what have you, there's an extra level of caution that should be taken. Some of us take it for granted that we just have an immune system that's taking care of things. But for the dog's sake, what you were saying earlier about their stomach having higher acid content, they have a shorter gut length, what have you. I mean, my dog would eat a sun-dried dead squirrel in a second if she could get her hands on it. If she can handle that, and I'm not going to freak out if she does. If she finds a carcass and is chewing on it, that's what they do. If she can handle that, she can handle a pasteurized raw dog food that's been handled to be fed raw. That's the thing. It's handled to be fed raw. Whereas, and that's one thing that worries me a little bit about you actually buying human food and feeding it raw. I'm not sure that food is handled in a way that's intended to be fed raw. I mean, we can do it, but I do think actually that the prepared dog foods are actually safer.
Yeah. And
I don't know how to reconcile that for people who don't have access like we do.
Well, right. And I was just going to say, like, and to clarify, because I wanted to look it up, because, so the HPP is the high pressure pasteurization. And so what it does is a non-thermal food preservation method that uses extremely high pressure instead of heat, eliminating harmful bacteria like Salmonella, E. coli, and Listeria. Listeria, I'm not sure what that is, but it kills the pathogens without cooking the food. So you still have it preserves the nutrients and enzymes and amino acids, and extends the life of the raw, and it's safer. Yeah. But I wanted to clarify on that. So, but also too, like to your point, we eat usually bison and elk and chicken and steak, like cow, cattle, 2 or 3 to 4 times a week, and those are all raw things. And same thing. It's like you just have to be, like smart about it. Like, don't be silly. Yeah,
exactly.
But but here's the thing, to be fair, when you have smaller, I have a 6-month-old human, and I have a 2.5-year-old human, and they're on the ground. The 6-month-old, especially now, because he's in the little bouncy thing, and he's on the ground, and the dogs are going over licking his feet, trying to lick his face. So to compromise people in your life, or if you have, like, again, my Mastiff, whose head is the size of a cinder block, and he's eating raw food, and he goes up and, like, those are things that I do think about. So the fact that We Feed Raw has that HPP in it, and I don't know what other companies do it. I just know that I work with We Feed Raw, so that's what I'm educated in, and that's the process and the way to do. So it makes me feel a lot better. I still try to say no, don't lick the baby, because you're gross anyway.
Yes,
but
because he also licks his butt and he eats dead things outside and rabbit poop.
Exactly. And and that was interesting to me. I saw back to the wolf sanctuary. There was a bird's nest, like a magpie's bird's nest, up in the pines, and one of the babies fell out. And it's sad, but it's life, right? And there was this group of people outside of the enclosure, and they were all like, "Oh no,
baby bird!"
Yeah, and then all of a sudden, this wolf just came trotting over and just went thunk, and just ate it.
Thank you.
Like that. Yep. And everyone was. But here's the interesting thing, and these are like the experiences that I've had in life to make me, I think, like a more well-rounded, educated person in the dog space. Is people were like, "Oh no," and I'm like, "What did you think was gonna happen? Like, did you think the wolf was gonna come over and nurture this baby bird that's chirping? Yeah. No, he's gonna eat it alive.
Of course. And we are so separated from the animals we eat that we don't really. It's all wrapped in cellophane and
the hitman
abstract. Yeah.
Yeah. The hitman butcher, right?
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. It's a whole thing. So what? So okay. So supplementing you can do from those companies, and we'll list them in the show notes for people who are listening and watching that we can find. So what are there other things like daily that you give your dogs what are they?
Fish oil. Our meats are very high in omega-6s, and so I really like an omega-3. A probiotic, maybe. It depends. I think there's an argument for a probiotic, but I think if I have a dog with a solid mind and a solid stool, I'm not necessarily going to pull that one out. And one thing I'm finding, and this is new to me, but not new to other holistic veterinarians. I was late to the game on this because I have a naturally skeptical mind, but vitamin D.
How are those being supplemented? Like with the fish oils, is that oil or pills?
Yeah, you can do either an oil that you pour or a pill. There's only 2 or 3 companies in this country I trust. So this is another whole conversation, but the supplement world is rife with counterfeits and just fake products, poor quality. Yeah. And so it is hard to know. There is a seal. It's not new. It's called the National Animal Supplement Council does third-party testing, independent testing. So if you were to create a supplement, you could send it to the National Supplement Council, and they would at least guarantee to the consumer that what's on the label is in the product and what's in the product is on the label, nothing more, nothing less. That's the only standard we have. It says nothing about quality. It just says we have truth in labeling. That's better than we've got in the human supplement world, where it's just a free-for-all. It's the Wild West. I forget what percentage of protein powders for people have actual steroids in them. Actual steroid. I mean, and it's not on the label. So you think, wow, I'm really building muscle. This is beautiful. Yeah, because you're taking steroids. You don't even know. Yeah, it's something like 30% of the products. It's scary. And people should know that. That has implications for your heart and your blood pressure. I mean, your kidneys, Jesus.
Everything.
Yeah, it's everything. So at least we have that. So if you're shopping around for a canine supplement, I would look for, it's a yellow oval. Sometimes it's very small, but it just says NASC. And that just means it was third-party tested. So lowest level of standard is that. 90% of supplements or more do not have that label. So to me, which throws away most of the whole industry. It's just garbage in my mind until they've proven to us that they are what they say they are. Again, skeptic mind. So now beyond that, there is... well, fish oils are tough. Nordic Naturals, you can put those, we'll name that one. There's one called Wiley's, which is probably the highest quality one out there. Those are the 2 companies I really trust. We're lucky to have in Woodstock a place that stocks good supplements. So sometimes I'll send people to their website. And but other than that, it is a bit of a buyer beware, and there's really no good place to get information. I worked with a supplement consultant, so I had my eyes opened more and went from skeptical to cynical. So, but I would say a fish oil, if you can find a good one.
Yeah, the Woodstock, just to cut you off for a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because you recommended me, it's Woodstock, I think it's just Woodstock vitamins,
yes,
right?
Yep.
So those are the ones that you recommended for me. So it's Woodstock vitamins, and we were getting right here is the Vital Joint series.
Good.
So
great.
So those are good. So that's a good company to get your. So to go back through it, it's going to be a D.
Yep, vitamin D.
What was
I should say this: vitamin D has to be dosed very precisely. So vitamin D is one of those things that you keep the bottle up on a high shelf. You make sure that children and animals can't get to it. It can cause toxicity and death if they get into it and it's usually a liquid, but if they get all of it, it's a big problem. So that has to be dosed very precisely. I really think, I'm finding that almost all of my patients are depleted in vitamin D. So I'm actually testing their levels first. I'm finding how depleted they are. The lab actually tells us how much to supplement to get them up to a sufficient level, and then there's a maintenance dose after that. If you get a puppy, you can just start at the maintenance dose, and that's published online.
And you're checking via blood sample.
Blood sample, yeah. It's about a $75 test. And but I'm finding like 4- and 5-year-olds are depleted. And don't forget, vitamin D is protective against cancer. Dogs cannot make vitamin D from the sun. They have to get it from their food. And
Interesting.
And guess what's most important in determining how they convert it to vitamin D3? their gut biome.
Okay, I was going to say K2 or...
Well, that tells it where to go in the body. K2 is kind of has to do with the distribution of it in the body, but it's D3 is the active form of the vitamin, and that conversion from D2 to D3 happens in the gut. And so I have had, in fact, I can tell you, I have 2 dogs in my practice. They are German short hair pointers. One is 5, one is 12. The 12-year-old has lymphoma and is on his second or third year now of chemo. He's like blowing away the,
cool.
Yeah, I know, it's really cool. So I tested both of their vitamin D levels to see where they were. He was low, the 12-year-old was low. The 5-year-old was depleted. Same household, same breed, same food. So there's more to it than just what they're eating. That's not everything. So I'm going to start keeping track of, I like data, so I'm going to start keeping track of what the vitamin D levels are and what these dogs are eating to see if I can find a correlation between diet and it'll be gut health, I think, that's going to mediate, those vitamin D values. But I suspected, my hypothesis is that actually the raw-fed dogs might be lower because it's not sprayed on, kibble, they spray on the vitamins, right? It's like, it's all balanced to, whatever degree AFCO says it should be. Whereas with the raw, it's a little more of the Wild West, and we don't, not all raw companies put vitamins in their foods. In fact, I think most of them don't. So for those who don't get the vitamin in their food, what will it look like? I thought it was going to be lower, but now seeing the German Shorthair Pointer, I'm not so sure because she's kibble fed and she's lower than any other patient I've had so far. So I don't really know what it's going to look like.
That is interesting. So when you take vitamin D, like your dog, are you supplementing with something to get it to the gut, or is D just good?
I think it's just being absorbed because their values come right up as soon as we start supplementing them.
You see it.
3 months, we recheck the number to make sure we got where we wanted to be, and then we drop them to maintenance. So I think it just gets absorbed because we're giving D3. We're giving them vitamin D3. It's already ready to go. It's biologically active, whereas what they get in the food is not necessarily.
And what does the deficiency look like in a dog, other than you checking in and saying, hey, like with people, you can see depression and some other behavioral things that happen when we, like we just went to Tennessee. We came back 2 days ago and we had sun and it was 65 and we could feel the sun heat and it was the babies were out and they were just like sunning them and it was just felt really good. But like with dogs, are you seeing something that makes you go, oh, this is a D3 or this is a D deficiency or?
No, I'm not. And the reason I even started looking at it was A, the test was developed. B, other holistic vets jumped on the bandwagon earlier than I did. But cancer is the big thing that I'm thinking about because it is, adequate vitamin D levels are protective against cancer in people. But I can't say that I have seen any changes in my patients once they get on vitamin D supplementation. So I don't know, but I just tested my dog. She's going on 6. So I'll be interested to see where she falls and if she needs supplementation, which I assume she will. I'll be interested to see if there's any changes in her because she has some seasonal allergies that have developed. So I don't know. I don't know what to expect, but it is kind of new in the field. I don't know of any conventional veterinarians who are looking at this because it's not the normal blood lab that you send it to. I think you can send a sample to Michigan State, but it's just not something we do a lot of.
Yeah. When you said something about the fish oil. Is the fish oil have to be a particular deliverable, or is it just like the pump fish oil?
I see.
Or
no, it can be either because some dogs don't like the taste of fish oil, so a pill is fine, a capsule is fine. I think it's probably more economical not to have the capsules and just to have the liquid. Like Nordic Naturals just has a pourable
just measure it
bottle. You just measure and pour.
Easy.
Yep. I will say if people are motivated to go get a fish oil, just start at like a half dose because it can cause some GI upset at first. So test the waters with a smaller dose and then move up to the recommended dose. But no, capsules or liquid are fine. Cool. I question the quality. And I mean, there are so few companies that I trust. The supplement consultant that I worked with had like 2 in mind that he liked. So that's why I either go to Woodstock or I use the 2 that he recommended. And
what's your attack on, not attack, but approach, I should say, on like flea and tick? Because I know that you can do a lot of holistic.
Yeah.
Because I had this guy that makes this this flea and tick powder that you put on the dog's food, especially here in United States, especially here in New York, where Lyme disease is rampant, it seems, with people and with animals. That was like a mixture of like all the like garlic and all these things. What do you recommend?
Well, okay, I go conventional on this because of the ticks. Fleas are an annoyance, right? They're kind of a pain in the neck. Nobody wants to deal with them. Ticks can kill you, and kill your dog. So 1% of dogs that get Lyme disease will die of a very rare complication called Lyme nephritis. It shuts the kidneys down. My own dog died of this, so it happens.
Wow.
Yeah, it was
1%.
Yeah, she was 6. So that year I had chosen not to use tick preventative because my daughter was a baby. We had moved into town. I actually think now that I know more about this, I actually think she picked up the tick before we moved into town, and I was using a tick preventative back then because she wasn't born yet. But once they have it, there's no treating it. It's fatal. And now, my other concern is, this is where my public health background comes into play. I want to know that my people are protected too, because most of, even the conventional flea and tick products, the tick has to bite the dog to get the drug to die. And that leaves lots of opportunity for those ticks to come in the house. And they engage in predatory behavior in the house. They have shown that they like climb up on your door frames, and they want to hitch a ride on your clothes. So if I ever get Lyme disease, it's going to be in my office because there's so many dogs coming in. I have a little jar that I throw all the ticks in that I'm picking off. I'm not going to get it from the woods because I'm super careful, but it's going to be in my office. So I like a Seresto collar, and I think it's Bravecto, I think is the other one, that has a repellent effect. I want the ticks to be repelled. I don't want them to land on my patient, to protect my patient and to protect my person and my people, especially children. Girls especially have been shown to be much more susceptible to the effects of Lyme disease. And having gone to a Lyme symposium, that was one of the scariest things I've seen. It was a lot of Lyme patients that were there, a lot of young women, oxygen tanks, wheelchairs, Parkinson's-like symptoms. It was very sobering. It made me think about moving away from this area because I was like, I'm raising 2 girls here, and it seems impossible. We're outdoor people, and it seems impossible not to get it. These ticks are so small, you won't find them on yourself, let alone your own dog. The nymphs are, I found one on my daughter when she was about 3. I was looking for it because I knew she'd been in the woods, and I almost missed it. It was so small. It was embedded in her back.
Ooh.
I had a naked sleeping child and a flashlight, and I almost missed it. That's how small it was.
You were looking.
And I was looking.
Wow.
I was looking. No joke. And so for me, it's like our biggest public health problem in the Northeast right now. And it's really the money and the research is not going into it. The only reason some doctors are starting to take it seriously is because they have their own personal experiences with it, and they realize, oh, this is a real thing, and chronic Lyme is a real problem. Plus, we also have other tick-borne illnesses. We've got Anaplasma right now, I'm seeing much more than Lyme. Doesn't seem to be as serious for dogs. Most of them seem to do okay, or they clear it quickly with doxycycline. But for people, they're landing in hospitals. I'm not seeing the chronicity of it as much in people, but I don't really know. I'm not sure anybody knows yet. And of course, as the climate warms, we're seeing other ones. I mean, a lot of people I know personally were diagnosed with Bartonella, Ehrlichia, which back when I was in vet school, you had to go to Tennessee or south to get Ehrlichia. It's here. And what's the other one? Babesia is now in 50% of our ticks. Used to be 1%.
Jeez, these things are boogers.
Oh, yeah. And you can get 1 tick bite and get 4 infectious diseases. So I just think the stakes are too high.
Right, risk over reward, right?
Yeah, can you imagine if you just couldn't come to work because you were in constant pain or exhausted or whatever, and if you had just put a tick preventative on your dog, you might not have gotten bitten in your bed when you were sleeping. I used to find dead bloated ticks in my bed all the time. Ugh. And I lived out like near the Saratoga airport. I wasn't, out in the boonies. I was just like in a little suburban neighborhood. Now I'm in town and it seems less, maybe it's because I have chickens. We've got chickens to deal with the tick situation, but it's a scourge. It's a real scourge. And I do worry a lot about my people more than my patients. 95% of dogs clear Lyme disease without any problem. They will get it. Right. They'll test positive, no symptoms. I'm not that worried about them, to be honest with you. Yep. The flea and tick for me, that choice is to protect my humans because we seem to be more susceptible. I mean, we don't really know. We don't know how many people are walking around positive with Lyme or Anaplasma because we're not doing the yearly testing that we do in dogs, but we have a lot of data in dogs, and we know most of them are immune. 5%, 4.9% of them, whatever, will get the typical symptoms, and then that 1% will die.
Yeah.
So it really depends on where your priorities are, what your risk factors are. Most of my clients are picking up ticks. They're in tick-infested their yards are infested. And so I don't mess around with holistic stuff at all on this. I used to, and they come in, they smell of all the essential oils, and I'm like getting my tick jar and pulling 10 ticks off of them. So it's not doing it.
Didn't work.
Yeah, didn't work. So I
remember when I asked you when the Seresto thing was going on. For those of you who don't know, there was like this, there was this reaction from Seresto collars that was giving dogs I think this neurological thing.
Yeah.
And it was like usually leading to euthanasia because they didn't know what to do with it. And I remember you told me, you go, that is so rare that happens. You're more likely to get Lyme disease than you are for your dog to get that. Yeah. And that's why I was like, oh, okay.
By far. And the big thing that was like I don't know what that was actually, because it was this big headline that hit the news. I got like 30 calls in one day from people asking me what they should do.
Yeah, a couple years ago.
Yeah, it was a couple of years ago. And I think there were maybe like 1,800 adverse cases that had been reported. Although some of them were like the dog ate the collar, so it wasn't even really an adverse event. And there's some it had seizures, it was mostly neurologic. And it really became this sensation. And I was like, well, I wonder what the denominator is here. How many Seresto collars are sold every year? And it's like 25 million. So if you look at put 1,800 over 25 million.
Yeah, it's very small. Yeah. I didn't.
We don't get the context is so important.
Yeah.
And it goes back to what you were saying. People read the news and they see
a soundbite.
Yeah. But you've got to think a little more. It is hard. You have to know science. You have to know probability and statistics, and if you have that raw number, it means nothing without a denominator.
Right. Yeah. Or if it's again, we see in the dog training, it's like this causes that, and it's like, well, don't do it like that.
Yeah.
Scare tactics.
Yeah.
Right.
I
want to talk about titer testing.
Yes.
So titer testing for me was like even before I got into, I guess, just really analyzing health and what vaccines can do, and not only people, but with dogs, like titer testing was something that I was brought to by a couple of different clients. And so can you explain your thoughts on titering and maybe a little bit of what it is clinically?
Sure.
And that would be cool.
So a titer is just a test that measures and quantifies antibody levels in the blood. So a titer just means that they are diluting the blood and measuring the antibody level, and they want to see at what dilution can we no longer detect antibody. And we know that they've drawn, a threshold and said that if you get down to this level, it means the dog is still protected. And I have clients who don't vaccinate their children, and they have titered their children against, let's say, tetanus, for example, and their children have antibodies against tetanus, not from a vaccine, but from natural exposure.
Yeah, wow.
And that actually brings up another point about your children and raw food, and we can go back to that. But so what we do is we draw blood, we send it to a lab, they run a titer, and they tell us to what dilution did they pick up the antibody. So based on Dr. Ron Schultz's research at the University of Wisconsin, he's a veterinarian, PhD researcher in veterinary immunology, and he's basically studied every vaccine that was ever created.
Ron Schultz?
Ron Schultz, yep. He's one of my favorite people. Because he's a real scientist, and he's been trying to get veterinarians to vaccinate less since I started in the field 32 years ago. Because when I started, we were vaccinating annually, and there's just zero science to say that needs to be done for viruses. I should be clear about that. For bacteria, like Lyme and leptospirosis, those vaccines only last about 9 months to a year. The human version of that would be like pertussis. We just don't get great immune responses to to vaccines against bacteria. Whereas against viruses, we get incredible coverage. And for us, it's considered lifelong. And tetanus is a bacterium, but my polio vaccine is not getting updated, and I will travel to places that have polio, and I will not update it because I know that my body remembers that it saw it one time and it developed antibodies against it. So what happens is we send the blood in and we get this number back, and it tells us whether or not the dog is protected. They will not accept it in New York State for a rabies vaccine, rabies titer, because we want 0 human cases against rabies, and we will not take any risk. And if there's any risk that the titer number does not correlate to actual protection, they won't take that risk, and they will tell you, we don't know 100% that the titer correlates to clinical protection. But in the world of parvo and distemper, the two and adenovirus, which is canine hepatitis, we pretty much have accepted that if we have a good protective titer, meaning that the antibody levels are adequate, that this dog is protected. The same is true for rabies, but we just don't want to say that it's 100% true, and we're not willing to do that. If it risks 1 human case, we don't accept it. What I'm finding is that when I vaccinate my puppies, and I use Ron Schultz's schedule, it's a much reduced schedule. I don't do it all the time. I'm not starting when they're babies, and I'm really starting at about 14 weeks. I also have, clients who are very compliant. They live in areas where they don't necessarily run into a lot of parvo or distemper. So it really does depend on where you live and who's around you and how they care for their dogs, because if they're not getting their dogs vaccinated, there's a good chance that they could have an infectious disease that your dog can get. So this is in the context of an environment where we kind of know what's around us and how people are taking care of their pets. So what I'm finding is if they get the puppy series, that includes the rabies, I start titering. I usually do a titer at a year. I want to make sure that the puppy vaccines were, they took, so to speak, right? That they actually got the antibodies. If they didn't, if they're a little low, which happens maybe 5% of the time, I'll give them a booster at a year and then check them again a year later. But typically, I'm having people just check every 3 years. I'm noticing that around the age of 8 and 9, that distemper titer has dropped.
When they were vaccinated at what age?
A puppy.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that means
lasting that long.
So that means that titering basically gives you an opportunity to draw blood to see if the vaccine you gave is still working in the dog, so you don't over-vaccinate.
That's right. That's right. Yep.
And that's really important because even with people, kids, and the more, I'm educating myself because I have kids, like they're vaccinating no matter what, instead of drawing blood and go, do we need this?
Yeah. Yeah.
What are there, to me, it would be obvious that there's complications of over-vaccinating. Do we know what those are? Or is it just like one of those things like, hey, we don't need it?
Right. It's kind of nebulous. So, I definitely think that for any individual, human or otherwise, or animal, if they're on the autoimmune spectrum, meaning they've picked up an autoimmune disease, it might be something small, like hypothyroidism is autoimmune in 95% of cases. I think if you're on the autoimmune spectrum, you have to be more cautious with vaccination.
Yeah.
But there is this question of, what's worse, getting an infection, because that can trigger an autoimmune response to something, or is it the vaccine? So I think, what I'm finding, and this is just in general terms, the older a patient gets, the more cautious we should be. I think when we're younger, we're kind of primed to take in this information, whether it's a germ, a bacterium or a virus or a vaccine, our immune system's kind of primed to start responding. But I'm more cautious as a patient gets older, or if they have cancer or an autoimmune disease. So that's why I try to just keep track of a number, and I watch as they get older. I will update their distemper if that number drops. I will update it before they hit their geriatric stage. So maybe when they're 8 or 9, I'll tell people, let's check that. And I do have a single distemper, valent vaccine, and I'll just give them that. The titers for parvo are through the roof their whole life, because they're running into parvo everywhere. I haven't had a dog yet, I don't think, that I've had to vaccinate against parvo after their initial series. So
and they're trying to do that annually?
Not anymore. Most places are not anymore. I like to think, anyways, that most places it's every 3 years now. That happened at some point during my career, and where we went from annual to every 3 years for distemper, parvo, and rabies. And that's Ron Schultz's work. Like, he's the reason that we're doing that. Yeah, he actually joined there's a group of doctors who put together guidelines for veterinarians, and he went right to the source. So he's been able to influence the field quite a bit. I think he'd like us to vaccinate less. His research shows that those vaccines are good for at least 7 years.
Wow.
I know. but it's hard to get the word out, and there's a lot of politics, I'm sure, involved in that. I've gone to meetings where they're updating us on guidelines, and they're quite vague, vague about it. They'll just say, look at each individual patient, make your decision based on what's best for the patient, but it's not really a guideline, I think they tell you, doctors tend to do what everyone else is doing.
Yeah.
This is what we do. This is how we do it. So it is hard to get doctors to change their mind. But titers are that's kind of where the proof is in the pudding.
One question I had is, when you are, like when you have a puppy.
Yeah.
Like I posted, like when I first got Burley, I had to bring him home from Texas. So I brought him through the airport and everything. And what's your recommendation on, because one of the things I get in my puppy videos is my vet said my puppy can't go out until these times. Yeah. And not only have I seen gigantic behavioral development and temperament problems with not allowing your puppy to be around people, other dogs, or even being outside. Mm-hmm. And that's just me. Like, I'm willing to risk bringing my puppy outside to know what the grass is and to know what the pavement is and to know what birds look like and what cars look like. To me, I would much rather risk, like, especially for a dog like my Borbal, who is naturally suspicious of everything and is going to be 200-pound security guard. Mm-hmm. I would choose temperament over the risk. Yeah. So what is your thoughts
That's a great
on
question.
that?
That's a really good question. And it is a perennial debate. I was lucky enough to spend a day with, his name's not going to come to me. He's the veterinarian and behaviorist at the University of California at Davis. I believe he's retired now. He's English and has a great sense of humor. Oh, I'm sure you'd know his name, but it's not going to come to me.
Try to look it up.
Okay. So I spent a day with him because I felt like my behavior training was pretty lousy as a veterinarian and vet school. I think a third of calls that come to a vet office are behavior related, right? Mm-hmm. And we have little to no training in it. I think the younger vets might have more now.
Yep.
But when I was in vet school, we actually had to petition for an elective, and they gave us this really crappy 1-credit elective. It was the most boring, useless class. I think now, hopefully, it's getting better. But I went and spent a day with this gentleman, and we talked about this. And, he told us that the socialization window closes at 14 weeks of age. We are not fully vaccinated.
Right.
We're just getting there.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. We have maternal because let's put Ron Schultz's work together with what we're talking about, because Ron has the data, right? Like, he measures antibody levels in dogs and he tests vaccines. So he also would agree with us that we have to prioritize the behavior and the desensitization to the world, and that we have to teach our dogs everything they need to know, basically, by the time they're 14. Not that what they need to know, what they need to experience by 14 weeks of age. The vacuum, visitors, going out into the world. So, and luckily, up until 14 weeks of age, if we have a dog that was born to a vaccinated mother, we know that those maternal antibodies are doing their job. They are there to protect this baby. And we also know that those maternal antibodies, these are the antibodies that they get from their milk.
Wow.
That they are protected until about, around 12 weeks of age. If you look at a curve, it starts dropping a little bit. It doesn't just bottom out, but it starts to drop. And that's when Ron Schultz wants us to start vaccinating. So the acquired immunity, which comes from vaccines, starts to climb. And so really, the only time that they're quite vulnerable is at 14 weeks of age, because that's really when the maternal antibodies are starting to drop, and we have not yet gotten full immunity from our vaccination. And for me, I'm actually just starting to vaccinate at 14 weeks, typically. So those first early weeks are wonderful for getting dogs out, getting them desensitized. Would I take them to a dog park? Nope.
Right.
No, I'm going to be, smart about this. But if I have a downtown like Saratoga, right, where you can just walk around and, you can pick them up if you want to keep them off the ground and just hand them off to people. That's a safe way to do it if they're small enough to be held. But I think getting them out, getting them to experience the world, the car, children, that is all has to happen before 14 weeks of age. Oh my God. his name almost came to me. I was just gonna, it's gone.
Yeah, I couldn't find it. That's okay.
His son is doing the work now too. Has picked up the
If you
Sirius dog training. That was his. Remember Sirius, 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 named after.
No, I don't.
The constellation. I used to, when I was out living in California, I always would send people to his.
Yes, text me. I'll try to find it, but text me his information.
Okay.
I'll put it in the show notes if people.
Yeah, I'm sure he's retired now, but his son has taken up the charge. Yeah.
So yeah, that was a big thing for me. Is when I was doing these puppy videos, in my backyard and walking down the road, people were like, "My vet said I shouldn't even put my puppy outside until these dates," and I'm like, "Look, again, this is subjective to me. In my opinion, is I have evidence by the thousands of dogs that I've worked with, and knowing, especially with COVID that happened, like everybody had it, they did, but it seemed like everyone was like, oh, I got a COVID puppy. And it's like, that was like the excuse for, even I'm still getting it, but it was an excuse for so long. And there is some warrant to that for sure. But not being able to go out and do normal things can hurt the dog's development.
Yeah.
And for me, like I said, I have a South African Mastiff that genetics play a big role in their temperament. And I need to know, like, when he goes out, like, these are good people. We're good. Nope, we don't need to be, because they're just naturally so suspicious. And you want to, that temperament was way more important than the small, tiny risks of the dog, particularly picking something up. And I just was willing to, and to me, it was a no-brainer. But to people that were asking about it, that was like a big thing.
Urban areas, I think, present a unique challenge.
Living in New York City or something like that.
You've got a high concentration of people, a high concentration of dogs, not a lot of places to even be outdoors in groups. That is a challenge, and I would say, I don't really know what I would say about that. I mean, I did my internship in New York, and we saw plenty of parvo there. I've never seen a case of distemper in 32 years, so I don't know how prevalent it is anymore, and largely because of vaccination. But parvo does seem, and that seems to be the dogs we see with parvo, puppies, and that's who it's most dangerous for. I think dogs get parvo, but they're vaccinated or they're mature enough that it doesn't hurt them. But those little babies who get parvo, I think they're coming from dams that don't have antibodies to give them, or they didn't get the milk. And so when you're in a high concentration, it is probably more of a risk, but maybe then you just hold your dog and go places, because I do think that socialization is critical.
It is.
And to find out that the window closes at 14 weeks was pretty sobering to me. I didn't know that, until I took that seminar with him. And I don't know if that's still the thinking. This would have been in 2005, so it was a while ago, but he was adamant that we had to get those puppies out there.
Yeah, it's a huge part of their temperament and their development. I never knew that the mom's milk had those properties.
Yeah, that's what the colostrum is. So the first 3 days, it's really the first week is where the that first milk that comes out is not really milk, it's colostrum, and colostrum is antibodies. It's literally like a vaccine. Yeah,
I remember when my wife with my two boys breastfeeding, and the yellow dense colostrum,
and it's antibodies.
And that's what she was. All the nurses were like, that's like that's the gold standard. Like that's the best type of milk, and you save it for later on. And that's pretty cool. All right, cool. Well, I really, 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 really appreciate you coming on.
My pleasure.
What I know that you don't take a ton of new clients, and you kind of, it's quality over quantity for you. But do you have any recommendations? People, you don't have to plug yourself, but are there recommendations? Are there books? Are there resources? Are there anybody that people, if they want to learn more about holistic veterinarian medicine?
There's some good resources. So one of my colleagues introduced me to Lou Olson. She's got a book on raw feeding, and it's got great information on how to balance the food, how to feed dogs when they are pregnant or sick, or how to supplement. And I consider her information to be pretty helpful. I have her book on my shelf, and so it's Lou, L-E-W, Olson, O-L-S-O-N. And I don't even remember what her PhD is in. So I like Lou Olson's work. Recalling names is not my strong suit, as you have seen.
That's okay.
I hit my 50s, and it was like my brain just died. Judy Morgan's got some fun books on, feeding your pet and your dog using Chinese medicine principles. So she breaks one of her books down into the 5 elements, which I'm a huge 5-element person. That's the wood, fire, earth, metal, water.
Yeah.
And it helps you know what kind of constitution your dog has and maybe where their health issues are and how to feed food that would help balance things out. I love 5-element theory. I could do another whole podcast on just that. And then, so Judy Morgan's stuff is really fun. And there's the classic book on Chinese medicine for pets is called 4 Paws, 5 Directions. And I want to say that's Cheryl Schwartz, but I'm not 100% sure. 4 Paws, 5 Directions. 5 Directions refers to the 5 elements, among other things. And it's a dense book, but it is... you don't have to sit down and just read it. You can use it as a reference book. It has a good index. And a lot of my clients have come in knowing things about their pets that I wouldn't have thought of because they've read her book.
Cool.
And so they've deepened my knowledge and understanding of what's going on with their dog. So I would say those are some of my favorites. And I think, you said that We Feed Raw. Is that just a company that feeds food, or do they connect people with resources?
No, they will deliver their food.
They deliver their food
to your door.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's why I really, like I said, that's why I really like him. Is people would always ask me, what do you feed your dog? What do you, Tom, like you're this professional, like seeking information. And because of your first instinct of the hot spots to that dog led me to raw food.
Yeah.
And so people are always like, I don't have this company or this farm next to me. We Feed Raw. You go online.
Yeah.
You pick out your dog's weight, your dog's activity level, their age, their breed, possible allergies, and they give you a couple of different proteins. They have like everything from venison, I think, to duck, to chicken, to beef, and they send it right to your door.
That's fantastic.
Exactly.
That's really nice.
That's why because people are like, how do I? And again, they're HPP, so they're compliant with the regulations. And
I do like that too. I like the pasteurization piece because it just adds a little extra layer of assurances, I think, for people. And, would I feed it to my kid? Probably not. But,
right.
But I feel like the infective load, that's something to think about when veterinarians are cautioning people about Salmonella and E. coli. It is about the infective load. You don't necessarily just get sick from one particle or bacterium. It is about how much of it. So like your kids whose faces are getting licked by your raw-fed dogs, they probably have to go and eat the meat to really get sick from a contaminated source than just those little tiny. In fact, if anything, you could argue that, and we know that children who grow up around pets are healthier.
Their immune systems.
Yeah, because it's not as clean. The environment is dirtier, and they're bringing in dirt from outside. They're bringing in whatever else, rabbit poop and what's in that. So ultimately, those little tiny micro doses of contaminants actually make us stronger over time. If you have a specific immune deficiency or disease, it's a different equation. Yep. But for people with a healthy immune system, I think it actually makes us healthier over time.
Yeah, immune systems are huge.
Yeah. Just don't eat the dog food or their poop. Yeah, and wash your hands. Wash your hands a lot. Yeah. That helps.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, it's great talking to you.
Thank you.